Hi, my name's Sarah Cheverton. I'm the editor-in-chief of a local independent community news website called Star and Crescent, based right here in Portsmouth and written by and for local people. It's really exciting to be part of the virtual pontoon symposium today, if somewhat strange. I can honestly say I have never recorded a talk before. Let's hope it doesn't show. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the project team at Pontoon and the University of Portsmouth for giving me the opportunity to be part of this event today. We've been really lucky at Star and Crescent to already have worked with the Pontoon team in showcasing the excellent work being done by the project and also making sure that information is out there about the many opportunities that local women have had to participate in the project. And the opportunities for personal and professional development that it's created. So it's a real pleasure for us to be involved. Today I'm going to talk to you about a project that we've worked on over the last 7 or 8 months that shares many of the goals of Pontoon, including female empowerment, providing opportunities for employment, developing digital skills, and of course, that experience that we've all become so familiar with during COVID-19, working from home. But first, a little bit about Star and Crescent itself, in case you're not familiar with the site or our work. Star and Crescent was founded by me and by my amazing colleague, Tom Sykes, who you might know through the Pontoon team, in 2015. It was very much a project born of frustration with the local news media, and in particular political coverage in the city, which we felt far too often duplicated the voices of people in power over the voices of local citizens, campaigners, and communities. As a result, we felt that there are always voices missing from the local social and political spectrum, and we've made it our mission to address that gap in representation. Basically, we wanted to create something that reached the places other local news websites didn't reach. To do that, we work directly with local activists and campaigners, community groups, voluntary sector organisations, and individual citizens in the city, as well as with student and professional writers living locally and even nationally. Our aim is to bring the perspective and voices that are so often missing or negatively reported on in the mainstream media to local people, to a local audience. In so doing, we aim to create opportunities for people to share, appreciate, and understand the experiences of people and communities they might not encounter in their everyday lives. And I'm sure it's not news to any of you that this has become more important for us more recently, where social divisions, both locally and nationally, often seem to be rising and causing real tensions in our communities. Social media, particularly in lockdown, often plays a role in that, creating so-called echo chambers, where it can be harder for us to come across perspectives and experiences that are not like our own. So what are the challenges facing marginalised groups and women in terms of their representation in the mainstream news? What sort of challenges locally are we trying to overcome at S&C? Well, the media is still in 2020 dominated by men and by voices that are, as female Guardian journalist Jane Martinson described it earlier this year, male, pale and posh. When she used this term, Jane was reporting on research published in September of this year by a group called Women in Journalism. The WIJ team found an alarming lack of diversity across both the journalists and the experts featured in the mainstream news, both on newspapers, radio, and television's primetime news in the UK. The team looked at news coverage across 1 week in July, and they found the lack of diversity in newsrooms nationally and locally takes a number of forms. So, for example, just 1 in 4 bylines were attributed to women out of 174 front page articles studied that week. Out of 111 people quoted on front pages during that week, just 16% were women. One was a black woman. Yes, I said one. Seven out of the 11 major newspapers checked did not feature a single BAME reporter on the front page during that week. On broadcast news, I'm sorry to tell you, it was even worse. 12% of reporters were from a BAME background, and the experts called on were far more likely to be men than women. For example, out of 877 expert guests featured on primetime TV news shows that week, 30% were women. These challenges, of course, also intersect with other social barriers faced by marginalised groups. For example, disability. In the 1960s, writer and activist Paul Hunt said of the representation of disability in the news, quote, "We are tired of being statistics, cases, wonderfully courageous examples to the world, pitiable objects to stimulate funding," end quote. This core challenge remains true to disabled people in terms of their underrepresentation or negative representation in the news today. Disabled people are the most underrepresented group in broadcasting, for example, according to a report by Diamond, which is a project set up in 2015 by major broadcasters in the UK, including the BBC, ITV, Channel 4 and Sky. According to research by Diamond carried out in 2017, disabled people made up just 6.6% of on-screen staff and 5.5% of off-screen staff in television. Similar challenges exist in the representation of religious communities, for example, Muslim communities in the UK, migrant communities, and asylum seekers and refugees, for example. All of these are likely to be underrepresented and or negatively represented in the mainstream news. I could go on, but I don't have all day, and neither do you. This is just a snapshot of what Star and Crescent's COVID-19 reporting project aimed to address right here in Portsmouth, where all of the challenges I've mentioned are often reproduced in local news across all platforms. So what was the project and how did it work? Well, in early 2020, we applied optimistically for funding from 2 emergency journalism funds set up in response to the pandemic. One was run by the European Journalism Centre, and the other was run by the Public Interest News Foundation, a relative newcomer to the publishing news world in the UK. We were successful in both applications, and we received across both funds just over £7,000. So what did we do with it? Well, we employed 4 local residents as freelancers to report on the impact of COVID-19 on communities in Portsmouth facing the same challenges that we mentioned to you earlier, that were more likely to be underrepresented or negatively represented in the mainstream news. We had only one condition to potential applicants. Our reporters had to, in some way, represent the communities that they aimed to be reporting on. We wanted to make sure that our reporters were able to understand firsthand the issues that they were being told about by local residents, and we wanted to directly challenge the lack of diversity in newsrooms across the UK I've already mentioned. Our reporters were Diana Jockey and Paris Ali Pilling, co-reporting on migrant communities and asylum seekers and refugees. In addition, they both took on extra roles. Paris reported on the impact of the pandemic on the local voluntary sector, including a series of in-depth reports in partnership with a local charity called Aurora New Dawn, who work with victims and survivors of domestic abuse, sexual violence and stalking across Portsmouth and Hampshire. Diana Jockey also reported on the impact of COVID-19 on people of colour in the city. Rosie Bremer reported on people with disabilities and long-term health conditions with a particular interest in the experience of people who had been told to or had chosen to shield. Becky Lodge reported on the impact of COVID-19 on female entrepreneurs and small business owners in the city. Each reporter was tasked with interviewing local people from these different groups. As we were still in lockdown and several reporters, including myself, faced increased vulnerability to COVID-19, and several reporters also had strong caring responsibilities in their own families, the whole project was designed to be conducted digitally only. This also meant that reporters had far more flexibility in managing their workload, which is a barrier that often impacts disproportionately on marginalised groups aiming to work in any industry, but often particularly in news media. Each interview conducted aimed to be an in-depth exploration of the person's experience of the pandemic so far. And we really wanted to showcase the complexity of people's lives, for example, the frequent intersection of disability and race and sex, as well as the diversity of the lives of our interviewees. No, there is no typical disabled experience. There is no typical experience of people of colour. And we wanted to showcase and challenge the reporting that often suggests that there is. In so doing, we aimed to not only improve the representation and understanding of different groups locally, but also to challenge many of the stereotypes and biases inherent in much mainstream news, which I briefly touched on earlier. We were incredibly proud of the diversity and detail in the stories that we were finally able to run as a result of the project. These included, to name just a tiny handful, an interview with 2 refugee women, which was delivered in partnership with the national charity Women for Refugee Women UK, interviews with local women of colour about their experiences during the pandemic, including their experiences of things like homeschooling, the coincidence of COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter movement, both in the USA and here in the UK, and, for example, having to change jobs as a result of the pandemic. Interviews with local women living with disabilities and long-term health conditions, including their access to or their lack of access to support on a local level, issues they experienced with their employers after lockdown and being expected to go back to work, perhaps with little understanding of the challenges they faced due to their health conditions, and the challenges and isolation of shielding. Finally, there is a fantastic series of interviews with local female entrepreneurs, including how many have survived and even thrived during the pandemic, as well as some who have experienced more extreme challenges and how they've overcome them, including by finding new sources of work if their business has been closed. I could give you examples of these stories all day, but you can find all of them and many, many more over at our website, which you can find at www.starandcrescent.org.uk, or by Googling Star and Crescent COVID-19 Reporting Project Portsmouth. You can also find first-hand reports from each of the reporters on what motivated them to come and work with us on the project itself, and we hope you enjoy them. So what does what we learned in our COVID-19 reporting project, how does that relate to the themes at the heart of Pontoon and of the symposium today? Well, the independent media sector is currently leading the way in working more closely with communities to deliver more diverse media than we currently have. This is vital because in local news alone, currently local newspapers are predominantly owned by just 4 large corporations, including here our local newspaper, The News, is owned by JPI. The barriers to more diverse representation of communities and citizens that I've already discussed have been embedded in the practices of these newsrooms for decades and decades. Whilst some things are changing, most people in marginalised groups, myself included, as a person with a disability, would say these things aren't changing fast enough. So this has led independent news providers like Star and Crescent, but also national independent news providers, to lead the way in delivering more diversity and more plurality in local news. This isn't an either or equation. It's about making the local news landscape far, far richer. Great examples of this across the UK, this isn't just happening on a local level, include, to give you just a handful of examples I'd recommend having a look at, GalDem, sharing stories from women and non-binary people of colour. The Disability News Service, which provides in-depth reporting on issues affecting the lives of disabled people in the UK. 5 Pillars, a website that provides British Muslim news. And Union News, which reports directly from the UK's trade union movement. Both locally and nationally, there are so many more independent news providers. And if I can give you one takeaway from my talk today, it would be check out the world of independent news publishing, not just in your hometown here in Portsmouth, but across the UK and across the world. It's a growing sector of publishing that really is hitting a very exciting time. COVID-19 has provided us with a unique opportunity to showcase this work right here in Portsmouth. And we're hopeful that more opportunities for continuing that work will continue to grow. This project, and more broadly, COVID-19, has also shown the incredible potential of what just a small group of people working from home and utilising digital technology towards shared goals can achieve, and what we can deliver in our communities. Our reporting on local female entrepreneurs and small business owners, for example, highlights the opportunities digital technology can offer, particularly to marginalised women, in evening up a playing field that often still works against us. Most of all, like Pontoon, Star and Crescent's COVID-19 reporting project shows the power of small groups of people to make a difference. We can't wait to continue doing just that right here in Portsmouth, and we do, of course, invite you to come and join us as readers or as contributors. And we have no doubt that the 1,500 women who have worked with the Pontoon project, both here and in France, will also continue doing that here in Portsmouth, in France, and across the world. If you'd like to find out more about us or our COVID-19 reporting project, head over to starandcrescent.org.uk. You can also get in touch with us on our Facebook page or our Twitter account by searching Star and Crescent Portsmouth. That should bring you to us. Or you can email me on editor@starandcrescent.org.uk. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the symposium. Have a great day.